I would make. But the policy levels, I don't think there is a problem there. It's more about the availability of the land. The second point I would like to make is on the infrastructure and the logistics being the topic for the day. Infrastructure today, we always, the first the project comes, then the infrastructure comes. Do we, I'm not specifically talking about a particular project, I'm talking about generally the approach. Are we creating the capacity, in advance? If there are limitations, Honorable Finance Minister spoke about certain limitations of budgets and how the 3% spend on capital expenditure or infrastructure came down to a 1% and increasing, but still not reaching that level. There are capacity constraints, execution constraints, etc. But having said that, when you're talking about the different scale of growth in India, let's take pause for a moment and look at what we are talking about, $1 trillion economy. It is a right time from a China plus one strategy. And please remember, China plus one is not India. China plus one is China plus another country. We can't take it for granted that it's coming to India. Do we have the infrastructure? Even I won't want to compare it because people get jingoistic about these things about China's infrastructure. Are we creating that? Can Tamil Nadu lead the way in creating that kind of a world-class infrastructure in ahead of time? That gives confidence for even the private sector to invest $2 billion, $3 billion, $4 billion, because that's something which you're talking about from a manufacturing perspective. You're talking about some of the large clusters to be formed. So that cluster, Hosur becoming a very big cluster for the electronic manufacturing, iPhone manufacturing, and the components, etc. You probably can have a very advanced wafer plant or a chip plant. Now that requires there are infrastructure constraints on water availability. It requires a lot of water. It requires power. A lot of things can be done. But from an overall perspective, are we building the infrastructure ahead of time is something which I want to just ponder as a question. Two things in addition to that is that when you're talking about the PLI scheme, there are a lot of federal state interplay in that, how much incentives can be provided and what are the limitations of that. But today we have to think big. That's when we can reach the $1 trillion economy. Thinking big means we are just talking about probably a larger incentive scheme for attracting the private sector to commit to that capital. There is a risk appetite that is taken by the promoters to come there, and it is welcome. It is welcome in every state today, but it has to be demonstrated through the evidence of larger investments coming there, not necessarily from foreign investors' perspective. It can be domestic investment as well. Indian business houses are now thinking of a larger scale because of the policies that is being attractive. So I think from an concluding the point is more about the investment required for the infrastructure. If you do it ahead of time, that really gives a confidence to the people and create some model clusters around that, what we have done there, and that can really take the manufacturing to the next level because the ground is very fertile. It is just that a lot of companies, as Cushman and Wakefield, for example, we look at it, a lot of international companies are coming and asking for the opportunities to invest. And where should they go? There is always a positioning that different states have created. And Tamil Nadu is on top of that. So we definitely get the initial interest. How do we convert that initial interest to the action is something which we'll have to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I think very right. It's the most important thing is like the investor has to understand where he's investing his or her money, and that is where it's important to have a view. And I think the national master plan that we are talking about is playing a is game changing role in this whole process, because with 900 layers exactly you know what is happening here. On that note, ma'am, may I seek your views on what do you foresee, I mean, from the government perspective. There's a huge effort which is going into developing of this national master plan with all of these layers. How do you foresee this is like, you know, helping the government, how the government is like building its state logistic master plan? How do you see this is like, you know, is in a direction to achieve a $1 trillion economy? Your initial thoughts, ma'am.
Thank you, Gupta ji, and thank you, Asucham. As such, let me give an introduction about TANSIDCO, even though people present here will be knowing what it is doing. Tamil Nadu Small Industries Development Corporation, it's developing industrial plots, and it is giving away to allotting it to all the MSMEs. Now that our target is towards $1 trillion economy, and my panel, co-panelists, they have been mm, touching upon certain aspects, particularly the infrastructure facility has to come first, and then the investors might be able to come and invest there. I would like to differ a bit on that particular thing, Thomas G. In fact, many a times we see it's like a question of which is coming first, the egg or the hen. So, in cases where we have developed industrial plots in uh, remote areas, remote